So let's take a look at carnitine supplementation in omnivores versus in vegans and the gut microbial pathway. Okay. So we're going to go right down to the conclusion. In humans, dietary carnitine is converted into an atherosclerotic and thrombosis-causing metabolite called TMAO by the gut microbiome. Okay, so initial rapid generation of atherogenic, intermediate blah blah blah, transformation into yada 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 via low abundance microbiota in omnivores, and to a markedly lower extent. It's still transformed in, it's still converted into it, but much less in vegans and vegetarians. So the gut microbiota, yada yada yada, this is going over the abstract, introduction, blah blah blah. You can read this all on your own. It really gets into the nitty gritty of how this works, but the point is, the final results of the fecal polymicrobial culture studies indicate that the marked increased generation of TMA and TMAO from oral L-carnitine in omnivores versus vegans and vegetarians appears to be due to significantly up to 10-fold greater gut microbial conversion. Okay? So what this is saying is because the microbiome of vegans and vegetarians differs from that of omnivores, you're not getting this high rate of this it doesn't, this shit, this TMA and TMAO, it causes blood clots and it causes hardening of the arteries. And it's not being produced when you're a vegan or a vegetarian, regardless of how much carnitine you're taking in. It's being produced at it is being produced, but at a 10-fold lesser rate, if you understand what I'm saying. So moving forward. So about 10 years ago, fecal transplants were all the rage. Okay? It was thought to be like this new miracle, yada yada yada, but this is talking about vegan fecal transplantation on carnitine and choline-derived TMAO and vascular inflammation in patients with metabolic syndrome. So you're taking vegan fecal microbiota and putting it into somebody that's an omnivore that has metabolic syndrome. So the conclusion is a single lean donor fecal microbiota transplantation in metabolic syndrome patients resulted in detectable changes in intestinal microbiota composition, but failed to elicit changes in TMAO production capacity or parameter because they're not changing their diet. But the point is, lean vegans have a different microbiota composition. So you can change what's growing in your guts by changing what you are eating. Okay? As was shown earlier with the dietary fibers and the phytonutrients and these things play a very important role at fostering the growth of good bacteria and destroying bad bacteria. So what are the clinical implications? This data opposes the previous stated hypothesis that the microbiota in vegans is incapable of carnitine to TMAO conversion. It is capable. The reason why we know that is because it said it's capable, it's just 10-fold less. Nevertheless, this small pile, so what they're also, I don't think, taking into consideration is the fact that if the person is still eating the crap that they were eating before, if they're not switching to a vegan diet, the fecal transplant will eventually alter into the original or a slightly different fecal, a different microbiome. Nevertheless, this small pilot study was first to directly assess the potential causal link among intestinal microbiota, TMAO, metabolism, and arterial wall inflammation in humans. Larger and better powered intervention studies, blah, blah, blah. Of course, always got to do more research, blah, 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 blah. Methods, design, going over the whole shebang here, moving forward. So people are probably like, yo, why are you taking carnitine? It seems like a pretty risky thing to be taking, okay? So, why do I take carnitine? That's a good question, right? Well, it's a very potent nootropic. It does a lot of things, but what you need to understand is vegetarians have lower plasma carnitine concentrations, okay, but maintain muscle carnitine stores compared to omnivores. Oral L-carnitine supplementation normalizes plasma carnitine stores and slightly increases muscle carnitine content in vegetarians, but without affecting muscle function and energy metabolism. Okay, so that's important to understand. Now, what you need to understand, this is only 2 grams of L-carnitine for 12 weeks. This is a 12-week study. This is not years and years and years. And it's only 2 grams. Most people supplement with 4 to 8 grams a day. I personally only supplement with 2 grams a day. But the point is, there are benefits to carnitine, and the fact is it helps with heart health, okay, and it's important that we're getting it. It helps with ATP, glycogen, etc. And you can make it. This is why you need to, if you're a vegan, you probably should also be supplementing with essential amino acids. Okay? So, plant-based diets lack taurine. We already know that. What is taurine? Now, the thing is, you make taurine, but you might not make enough of it, particularly in times of stress. This is also true with glutamine. Although you get all the necessary amino acids to make these substances on a vegan diet, and glutamine is in vegan foods. With taurine, it's not. But I still recommend supplementing with glutamine. But before I get into that, taurine is considered a semi-essential amino acid. Your liver makes small amounts of it from the amino acids cysteine and methionine. The process requires, and that's what you have to remember, a vegan diet is also low in methionine. This is one reason why you may wish to supplement with essential amino acids. This process requires yada yada yada, or coenzyme B6. Again, this is why you have to take your B vitamins. Animal proteins like meat, fish, eggs, and dairy provide taurine, but plants fail to contain any appreciable amounts. If you consume only plants, okay, your taurine tissue stores can become depleted over time, especially if you're engaging in things that cause, stress, okay? So infants and children have a high need for taurine. So children especially probably should be supplementing with taurine if they're on a plant-based diet during growth and development. Taurine is found in highly active tissues, especially the heart, skeletal muscles, brain, eyes, liver, plasma, white blood cells. Okay, scientists have found taurine in the pancreas, bones, and testicles. Okay, and other tissues. Fundamental to cellular homeostasis, taurine is considered a fundamental mediator of homeostasis. Okay? Homeostasis is balance. It's your body's natural state of everything's cool. And a very essential amino acid for its numerous functions. It protects against oxidative and inflammatory stress and regulates several physiological mechanisms. Sufficient taurine is necessary to maintain cellular homeostasis with osmoregulation, which regulates water and other fluids in and out of cells. It helps manage cell volume, stabilization of the cell membrane, calcium movement in and out of cells. Okay, so this helps to, if you're having heart issues like heart palpitations, things like this, you might want to consider utilization of taurine. Okay, now remember, I'm not a physician. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a DO. I'm not an MD, not an ND, not a EMT, not a nutritionist, not a dietitian, not a chiropractor, not an LPN, not an RN, not a CNA, not a nurse practitioner, nothing like that. So, eyes, retina, and light stress. Vision is generally considered the most dominant sense used to take in information. This very high activity sensory organ creates a high need for taurine. The lens, cornea, and especially the retina contain very high concentrations of taurine. Retinal tissues depend heavily on optimal levels of taurine, more so than any other amino acid for vision. Taurine protects the retina from light stress, sunlight, artificial lights, as this stimulus causes release of glutamate. Glutamate is an excitatory neurotransmitter used by the brain for alertness. It is also released in the eye in response to light and processing information. Taurine buffers against glutamate stress. People may have heard of monosodium glutamate. The glutamate in monosodium glutamate is why people consider MSG to be an excitotoxin, but there's not really any proof behind that. So taurine protects against light-induced tissue stress that contributes to the breakdown of sensitive lipids in the retina. Taurine shields photoreceptors, which helps sustain healthy vision. Taurine has also been found to help regenerate aging retinal cells. A recent 2021 animal study demonstrated the loss of eye retina protection when taurine levels were depleted by stressors, including light exposure. Insufficient taurine levels in the eye led to thinning of the retina, shortening of the photoreceptors, increased oxidative stress that caused microglial cell activation and damage to nerve cells and its connections to other nerves, ultimately affecting vision quality. Think about taurine in the context with youth who don't eat animal proteins and spend substantial amount of time in front of screens. What is their eye health going to be like in 20 or 30 years? What about the elderly who do not eat meat and have failing vision? Taurine and the brain and brain health. Abundant amounts of taurine are found in the brain, where it is needed for neural development in the young and neuroregeneration as we age. Taurine helps dampen pain signals, affects body temperature regulation, and suppresses appetite. Its antioxidant effect protects nerve tissues from changes in oxygenation and tissue. Taurine is also necessary to maintain cerebral function, and supports the hippocampus as we age. So if you have post-traumatic stress disorder, which a lot of people with post-traumatic stress disorder, it's believed, have a shrinking hippocampus, taurine might be something you want to think about supplementing with. The cerebellum, particularly if you are a vegan. The cerebellum is part of your brain that provides balance, movement, coordination, and hand-eye coordination. Activities that require practice, like playing the piano, catching a ball, or riding a bicycle, engage the cerebellum. The hippocampus is the memory center of your brain. This is also why you want to try to do activities that incorporate the motor cortex if you have PTSD. Taurine provides stability to nerves in other ways. It helps calm nerve excitation and irritability as taurine attaches to GABA receptors in the brain. GABA is the main inhibitory calming neurotransmitter. This interaction helps buffer and defend against the effects of excessive glutamate excitation. Taurine, skeletal and cardiac muscle. Large amounts of taurine are found in the skeletal and cardiac muscles. Muscles use taurine for mitochondrial function, antioxidant protection, and burning of fats for muscle energy, okay, and power. It also, so if you're on a ketogenic diet, this might also be something you want to look into. It also helps calcium management for contraction, relaxation, in skeletal and heart muscles. Longer-term taurine supplementation in animals showed taurine improved muscle strength. And that's what I meant. That 12-week study, that's not that great. You need a little longer. You need a little longer to try and build up the taurine stores. Taurine use also lowered levels of TNF-A and other inflammatory markers, so it lowers inflammation. And various human studies, taurine demonstrated positive effects in managing exercise stress and skeletal muscles and cardiovascular tissues. Results showed taurine supported the regeneration of muscle fibers and protected exercise-induced arterial stiffness and endothelial lining stress. Additional benefits: taurine increases cell membrane stability, which helps calcium and sodium move in and out of cells appropriately rather than build up in the wrong places. Learn about SENS. I might do a whole video on the SENS concept of extending lifespan, but you don't want gunk in your extracellular matrix or in your cells. This is especially important for cellular homeostasis and proper electrical activity in your heart, blood vessels, muscles, and brain. Taurine is a key nutrient in cardiovascular and nervous system health. Okay, taurine supports the parasympathetic tone, rest and relaxation, so this helps to control with autonomic dysfunction. It helps get that in order. Taurine in mitochondria, as described earlier, highly active tissues contain substantial amounts of taurine. These same tissues also contain large amounts of mitochondria. Due to its antioxidant activities, taurine helps protect mitochondria and electron transport chain. It also helps protect the membranes in and around mitochondria. Mitochondria are your cell's battery and energy producers that are directly related with your vitality. Taurine in the liver. Taurine is one of many nutrients used by the liver for detoxification, bile acid production, and antioxidant production, antioxidant protection. It helps protect the liver and other organs from alcohol, heavy metals, plastics, herbicides, pesticides, and other toxins. It also assists in cholesterol and blood sugar metabolism within the liver. Liver cells become highly stressed when taurine reserves are lacking. Summary: although your body can make a small amount of taurine, taurine is necessary for a whole load of shit. So if you're following a plant-based diet, you may wish to consider supplementing with it. Fluid management in and out of cells, cell membrane integrity, mitochondrial function, eyes and vision, heart and blood vessels, brain and muscles, liver and bile acid production suffer without adequate taurine. If your dietary pattern has trended toward the flexitarian diet or semi-vegetarian diet or full vegetarian diet, the benefits may be undetermined from the lack of taurine. Make sure taurine is part of your aging well nutritional regime. Your heart, brain, eyes, muscles, liver, etc. will work and feel better. Okay, so keep that in mind. So, taurine supplemented vegan diet may blunt the contribution of neutrophil activation to acute coronary events. So what happens is, so neutrophils are activated in the coronary circulation, yada, yada, yada. They screw up your blood vessels and can cause them to burst. And wonderfully enough, taurine blunts that. So what happens is the physiological antagonist, yada, yada, yada. Taurine also has platelet stabilizing and antihypertensive effects. So it's kind of like a natural beta blocker in a lot of ways. this presumably could reduce coronary risk. You actually, with my beta blocker, I'm supposed to be a little bit more careful than I am with taurine and my beta blocker, because it actually does do what the beta blocker does, but it's a natural beta blocker. Taurine is one of the things I began supplementing with due to the autonomic dysfunction. So moving forward, glutamine is a supplement that I believe in hardcore. I was turned on to taurine when I was reading about what's his name, Frank Zane, the bodybuilder. Glutamine is a 5-carbon neutral amino acid combining yada 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 yada. Under normal circumstances, glutamine is regularly synthesized and stored in skeletal muscle. Unfortunately, that's normal circumstances. Whilst lesser amounts are produced in the liver, lungs, and brain, since it can be produced by the body, it is regarded as a non-essential amino acid. But oh, how that is so wrong. However, this does not apply to conditions of excessive organ and tissue demand, such as sepsis, other states of catabolic stress declines, such as exercise. Okay, so you got to keep this in mind. The demands or athletics. The demands are then met in part by protein breakdown in the skeletal muscle. We don't want that to happen, do we? With the release of large amounts of glutamine, and glutamine becomes conditionally essential amino acid. Consequences of glutamine depletion. Well, okay, so what happens is during critical illness, the gut mucosal cells, which remember, glutamine is known as intestinal permeability factor. That's its nickname. So it's when it's deprived of glutamine and ceases to perform their barrier function, so you start getting endotoxemia. Okay? So, limitations to use of free glutamine. In theory, the intracellular glutamine depletion caused by blah, 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 blah. The drawback of glutamine instability can, however, be overcome by the use of synthetic dipeptides with glutamine residues, yada, 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 clinical studies, yada, 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 yada. These are all the clinical. Glutamine supplemented peritoneal feeding. This is when it goes right into the guts. The first clinical, when you're pumping food right into the gut. The first clinical study with a synthetic dipeptide was performed in 1989 in patients undergoing yada 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 yada. In surgical patients, TPN was supplemented with glycine and glutamine, improved nitrogen economy, meaning it helped with the nitrogen balance. So patient groups that may benefit from glutamine supplementation include severe catabolic illness. Now remember the 36 eggs a day diet. It was used for burn patients. Well, maybe you don't want to eat 36 eggs a day. Maybe you just want to take a little glutamine. So, burn victims, bone marrow transplant people, acute chronic infection, other critical illnesses, intestinal dysfunction, inflammatory bowel disease, infectious enteritis. So what's funny is, say you have IBS and you go to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist will like, "You're wacky, here's some Xanax," and you're still shitting your brains out. Well, maybe you might want to go to a naturopath. Maybe you might want to talk to a naturopath about glutamine. Necrotizing enterocolitis or intestinal immaturity, short bowel syndrome, mucosal damage following chemotherapy, surgical gastrointestinal patients, immunodeficiency syndromes like HIV, immune system dysfunction associated with critical illness or bone marrow transplantation, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome or AIDS, advanced malignant disease, glutamine depleted patients with cancer, low birth weight babies. This is people that are going to most likely benefit from a little bit of glutamine supplementation. Okay, so a decade ago, blah, 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 with pancreatic glutamine, yada, yada, yada. So the availability of stable preparations of glutamine dipeptides opens the why, blah, 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 blah. Risk of da. In my opinion, everyone, vegan, vegetarian, omnivore, carnivore, what have you, breatharian, whatever, should be supplementing with glutamine. So this is about 7 nutrients you can't get from plants. Okay, so let's look here. B12. Obviously, you should be taking B12 and folate. Okay, why do I say B12 and folate? You want to take them together. And in my opinion, I take B12, folate, and a multivitamin. Okay. Creatine. You don't need to supplement with creatine. I wouldn't worry too much about that one. Carnosine, it's better to supplement with beta-alanine. So dietary sources of beta-alanine may contribute. The beta-alanine is going to raise your carnosine more than taking carnosine will, because carnosine is destroyed in the gut. But the thing that you need to worry about with beta-alanine is it causes paresthesia, and you'll get all tingly and wacky. It feels really weird. It's kind of cool, actually, but you got to be aware of it or it will freak you the hell out. Okay, vitamin D3, pretty much everybody these days should be supplementing, vitamin D3 I should say, should be supplementing with vitamin D3, or vitamin D2, it doesn't, but you should be supplementing with it. The thing that you need to understand though is this. Okay, you can overdo vitamin D3, although it's uncommon, it can happen. But you shouldn't be taking more than 5,000 milligrams or 5,000 IUs a day. So people that are going to benefit from this this is what it helps prevent, because you don't want any of this shit. You don't want osteoporosis, you don't want cancer, you don't want heart disease, you don't want MS, you don't want depression, you don't want impaired brain function, you don't want muscle wasting and reduced strength. Okay, don't want any of that. So probably it would be a good idea, not a doctor, probably would be a good idea for most people to supplement with D3. DHA, completely unnecessary. You can take canola oil. Vegans can get this by taking a supplement. You can take algae oil. I take canola oil or other sources of plant-based omega-3s or ALA. Heme iron, you don't really have to worry about. Just get your vitamin C and it'll help you absorb iron from plants. Moving forward. So, what do I consider to be an ideal diet? Well, number one, what I think that we need to do is we need to look at what is the traditional diet of the human being. Okay? So, this is the happy medium between being 100% plant-based and being an omnivore, or a carnivore, I should say. But, so, the answer between being a carnivore and a vegan, or 100% plant-based, or a strict vegetarian, the difference is, or the happy medium is, a traditional eating pattern. So, all of these diets, what you need to understand, every human diet, okay, it's basically every traditional eating pattern. It's going to be made primarily of vegetables, a little bit of, primarily vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, okay? Nuts, seeds, herbs, spices, etc. A little bit of meat, a little bit of seafood, some dairy, okay? So you got the Mediterranean diet, you got the African heritage diet, you got the Latin American diet, you got the Asian American diet, and you got the vegetarian or vegan diet. Of course, vegan or vegetarian diet would be plant-based, plant-centered, you know, but they're all plant-centered, okay? So what you need to understand here is this. You start with something like this. This is your happy medium. Then you begin to supplement with things like a multivitamin, okay? So you want to take a multivitamin, you're still going to want to take an essential amino acid supplement, you're still going to want to take your glutamine, okay? You're still going to want to take your taurine. You're probably not going to want to take your carnitine, though, if you're on an omnivorous diet, because it doesn't fare well. Remember, it's converted tenfold more to TMAO. But the point is, what you want to make sure you're doing is you want to make sure you're starting with a traditional, healthy diet and supplementing with key nutrients that are going to help you maintain your health longer. So this is that. What do I consider the ideal diet to be? Well, that I consider to be a 100% plant-based diet, a strict vegetarian diet, what people call a vegan diet, and to supplement that with essential amino acids, to supplement that with carnitine, to supplement that with taurine, to supplement that with a multivitamin, and to supplement that with, of course, extra B vitamins, D3, yada, 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 what I've already talked about. That's your ideal diet. That is an ideal diet, okay? A lot of people aren't going to do that shit. So what they can do is they can follow a traditional eating protocol like this and supplement with the longevity nutrients. Look into Bruce Ames, Dr. Bruce Ames. One of the diets that I think is ideal, if you're not going to go 100% plant-based, is look into the Okinawan diet, which is essentially just like these diets, except you're focusing a lot more on the vegetables and less on the grains. Okay, less on the grains, less on the meat, very little dairy, almost no dairy, okay, and it's focused almost entirely on vegetables with a tiny bit of fish. And that's the thing, what you have to understand is, if you remember in the traditional Inuit diet, that's mostly fish and high variety, did seem to prevent heart disease. Fish prevents heart disease. We know that shit already. Moving forward. Now, I personally don't believe that you should be favoring high carbohydrate fruits and vegetables, with the exception of legumes. Legumes should make up the center point of your diet, but you have to remember, at least half of the carbohydrates in most beans are what? Fiber. At least a third to a half is fiber. So you want that to help with the intestinal permeability, okay? Meaning stopping the intestinal permeability. So which vegetables are low carb? Vegetables growing above the ground tend to be lower carb. Vegetables growing below the ground tend to be more carbohydrate dense. Of course, if people don't understand this, this is because the root vegetables, that's where at wintertime the plant stores its yummy, good sugar goodness and starch in the root, okay? So above ground vegetables that you want to be eating, of course, lettuces, greens, etc., asparagus, celery, iceberg lettuce you can eat. It's mostly water, but it's cool. Avocado, scallions, cabbage, olives, cucumber, zucchini, eggplant, cauliflower, kale, tomato, green pepper, broccoli, mushrooms. That broccoli is essentially a green. Sugar snaps, red pepper, essentially a fruit, but you know, we're not going to argue with the fact that tomatoes, peppers, or pumpkins are fruit. We're not going to bother with that right now. But the tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, zucchini, wow, there's a lot of fruits in here. I wasn't paying attention. So these guys, these are what you want to be chowing down on. Now, below ground vegetables you want to be chowing down on would be like the radish, the daikon, celeriac, rutabaga, red onion, carrot, onion, beetroot, parsnip, leek, okay? Not so much on the potatoes. Another higher carbohydrate food that you might want to be eating a considerable amount of, the sweet potato. Okay, the sweet potato, because of the phytonutrient compound and unique fibers and proteins in it, has a host of beneficial effects. So beans and sweet potatoes actually make a pretty tasty combination. But if you're going to have sweet potato, forego the fruit for dessert. Jerusalem artichoke shallots. Okay, these are different ones you want to be chowing down on here. So what you want to also understand is no fruit and no vegetable are really off limits, but if you're going to have, so for example, You want to eat things like blueberries, strawberries, blackberries, raspberries, again, because even with the sugar, even though it's minimal sugar, number one, but even with the sugar, the phytonutrient content is so pronounced that it's going to have a beneficial effect. But you don't want to eat unlimited quantities. Also, you want to eat things like melons and things like this, plums, cherries. You see what I'm saying? Now, a banana, see what you have to understand here, for 20 grams of sugar, I believe these are sugar, this is measuring sugar, it looks like, but for 20 grams of sugar, you can have 5 servings of raspberries, 5 servings of blackberries. Oh, I'm sorry, 4. My multiplication is screwing with me. I'm tired, more tired than I thought. So what my point is you can either have 5 servings of those berries or 1 serving of bananas. Do you understand how that works? And also, you should never eat fruit alone. You should always eat it with a savory meal like beans. Something that's going to control the rate at which those carbohydrates enter the bloodstream. So, oh no, that was total carbohydrates. Okay, so I'll keep all that in mind. But berries, these are a traditional food that's very important to the overall diet. Of course, the phytonutrients are very important to the health of the gut microbiome, as I've gone over. Again, these contain special fibers, phytonutrients. With pineapple, raw pineapple has bromelain, which helps digest protein. Okay. And we're going to move on here. Oh, here we go. The top 10 low-carb fruits. Here we go. Raspberries. So, 1 cup of raspberries has 3 grams of carbs. A half cup of blackberries has 4 grams of carbs. Strawberries, 6 grams of carbs. A plum, 1 medium, only has 7 grams of carbs. A clementine, 8 grams of carbs. So you can imagine you're eating this as dessert. I don't have cakes and candies and whatnot in here, but you can imagine the amount of sugar in a piece of cheesecake, or the amount of sugar in a piece of chocolate cake, etc. So that's what you need to be looking at here. Compare this, have a half a cup of cherries for dessert instead of a piece of cake. Okay, this isn't rocket science on how to eat healthy. We've known this for hundreds and hundreds of years at this point. Don't eat refined bullshit. So another thing you want to be looking to for health is the phytonutrient content of herbs and spices. You want to be banging out the herbs and spices. Okay, so this is the antioxidant content, which is a fancy way of saying phytonutrients. You can read this on your own. I go over this stuff a lot, but is there a role of dietary antioxidant, whatever, okay, based on dual blah blah blah, 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 there are numerous antioxidants and dietary plants. Carotenoids are ubiquitous in the plant kingdom, and many as 1,000 naturally occurring variants. So this is why I take zeaxanthin, astaxanthin, and lutein right here. These are carotenoids. I also eat a lot of tomato paste because of the lycopene. Total antioxidant contents of foods and drinks. You can check this out. This is why I drink cocoa every day. Conclusions. The total content of antioxidants has been assessed in more than 3,500 foods. This provides a large database to support research into dietary antioxidants, health, and disease. The results show large variations between food categories and within each category. Herbs and spices and composite herbal medicines are among the categories that contain the most of these phytonutrients, these antioxidants. So this here is a little neato bandito chart about the ORAC value of various foods. So this is per 100 grams. Okay, so, or per 1 teaspoon, 4 grams per 1 tablespoon. So cloves, they're kicking ass, but if you can stomach a lot of them, you know, oregano, I use a lot of oregano on purpose. It's very good for you. I recommend people read Dr. Lee's book. I almost said eat Dr. Lee's book. That would have sounded kind of funny. Eat to Beat Disease. Rosemary. Okay, you can see thyme. This is what this stuff you eat. Ground cinnamon, turmeric, vanilla beans, sage, Szechuan pepper, parsley, nutmeg, basil, cacao, cumin, baking chocolate, ginger, black pepper, sage. You can see all this. You check this out on your own. So this is the ORAC value list, top 100 highest antioxidant spices and herb products. The following list consists of high ORAC value foods. Acai berry, blueberries are basically just as good, don't fall for that crap. Okay, yada yada yada. This is some cacao powder, Mayan cacao powder, a superfood. We can read that if you want in the future. ORAC list, this is showing the different stuff here. So you see beans are also providers of these magnificent phytonutrients. So keep that in mind. Again, blueberries top of the list here. Dates not the top of the list. Too many vegans eat fucking dates. Okay, don't eat dates. Why am I saying don't eat dates? Dates, they do have phytonutrients, but they have oodles of fucking sugar in them. So, of course, top 100, cloves, sumac bran, cinnamon, sorghum, oregano, turmeric, just boom, all the way down, 100, boom, just read it off, bam, 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 bam. Okay, I would not recommend consuming Concord grape juice either. However, red leaf lettuce, ideal. Guava, not too bad. Cardamom, excellent. Blueberry juice, you can just throw blueberries in a blender, you know. Agave, pears, raisins. I would recommend no sugar added dried cranberries, apples, broccoli, cabbage, peanuts, apricots, gooseberries, cherries, figs, currants, peanut butter, boom, 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 all the way up, boom, 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 boom. See what I'm saying? Check that out. That's some cool shit. You could have sage tea. Remember, you want to limit your caffeine intake anyway. Have a little sage tea. Don't use Dutch cocoa powder, but even if you do, that's pretty high. It's in the top 100, but you want to go for the regular. Because why don't you want Dutch? Because regular cocoa powder, unsweetened, has 80,933, whereas Dutch cocoa, still magnificent, but not great, only 40,200. Okay, so yeah, instead of drinking black tea or green tea, try some sage tea, try some marjoram tea, try some thyme tea, try some sage tea. Okay, there's different ways to enjoy different things differently. Okay, the people of Sardinia enjoy herbal teas, not traditional Chinese tea. Moving forward. So you want to supplement with amino acids. Look, check this out. Not exercising, but just supplementing with essential amino acids increases lean body mass, basal muscle protein synthesis, and insulin-like growth factor, okay? So this is why you want to be taking this stuff. So essential amino acids improve lean body mass and basal muscle protein synthesis in older individuals. The acute anabolic response of essential amino acids is maintained over time and can improve lean body mass. So you got to keep taking it. It's not something you can take one time and expect to look like Schwarzenegger. In fact, you're probably not going to look like Schwarzenegger just by taking essential amino acids. But however, with a little bit of essential amino acids and a little bit of exercise, you can help maintain your muscle mass. And I like to add a little extra leucine. So leucine-enriched protein supplementation increases lean body mass in healthy Korean adults age 50 and over, yada, 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 yada. So we're going to bang it out. Let's see where we're at here. I just want to show you the conclusion. You can read this all on your own. Very well-produced study. Well-performed study, I should say. But leucine is another amino acid you're not going to be getting a whole ton of in a vegan diet. So, let's see here. So it also increases strength. That's what's important. So in conclusion, this study, they investigated the effects of blah, blah, blah. Subjects maintained high intake compliance and supplementation was effective for increasing muscle mass. It was effective for increasing muscle mass, specifically more effective in subjects aged 50 to 65, and they conclude that early prevention of sarcopenia may be an important strategy for muscle retention. Start now, not when you're old. So I recommend taking pea protein on top of the other amino acids, and the reason why pea protein is as anabolic as whey protein on whole body protein retention. Just keep that in mind. So what you have to understand a lot of this, let's look at the protein value or protein quality. Let's see. One of the problems I think people misunderstand is they don't actually look at what's in the food. If you remember, eating 3 servings of black beans provides enough methionine for the whole day for most people, whereas other people are like, oh, well, black beans are an incomplete protein, you need wheat with them. Well, wheat don't provide dick in the way of protein. So, yeah, they collect blah, 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 blah. So, protein synthesis measurement, blah, 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 blah. mRNA analysis, yada, 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 yada. Nitrogen intake and fecal and urinary nitrogen contents were evaluated during the metabolic cage period. None of these parameters were significantly different between the rat groups. So the nitrogen balance was not different whether it was casein, whey, or pea protein. However, what we know is casein is not a very good protein to be utilizing, if you remember from the China study. If you don't remember, look up T. Colin Campbell and Google T. Colin Campbell casein. So people might wonder why I kept recommending that a diet be legume-centered instead of grain-centered. Beans and other legumes have multiple nutritional qualities that reduce the risk of many diseases. However, the link between legume intake and obesity remains unclear. So let's just skip to the bottom here. Bean intake and waist circumference was correlated, blah, blah, blah. Mean waist circumference differs significantly across yada, yada, yada. Average waist, blah, blah, blah. Discussion. The present study was conducted to determine the association between legume intake, particularly beans, and body fat percentage in women. Waist circumference was employed as a secondary outcome measure, yada, 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 yada. So the conclusion... This is why you want to be eating a load of beans. In conclusion, beans are a unique food. They are a functional food, okay? They have multiple traits, making them nutritious and filling. Beans are a vegetable. They are a vegetable, a starch, and a protein. So remember that. They are a vegetable, a starch, and a protein. I don't know why they didn't include them as a starch here. They are all three. Vegetable, starch, protein. Vegetable, starch, protein. They have 3 places on the food pyramid for a good reason. Okay? They are nutrient dense but not high in calories. High nutrients, low calories. CRON. Calorie restriction with optimal nutrition. Although they have many favorable characteristics, consumption levels are low in most developed countries. In the present study, as bean intake increases and as adherence to a bean-based dietary pattern increased, body fat levels decreased. Those with high intakes had less abdominal fat than those with low intakes of beans. Keep that in mind. So what is a healthy body composition? Well, a healthy body composition, I'm not going to read this whole thing. You can read it on your own, but you don't want a lot of fat and you want a considerable amount of muscle. Okay? And of course, you want to stay hydrated and you want a dense skeleton. So, what's considered a healthy body composition? A healthy or ideal body composition of a patient's body is difficult to determine with so many body fat percentage. The ideal body fat for women is slightly higher than men, and women need to understand that. They don't need to be so skinny that it's dangerous, okay? So, so 10% blah blah. So women requiring 10 to 13% just to function normally. So women require 10 to 13% to function normally. A young woman may be healthy at 31% body fat. Okay? So pretty pleasingly plump there. Athletes have lower ideal body fat percentage, blah blah blah. Ready to learn more, yada yada yada. So, yeah, you want high muscle mass, low body fat, dense skeleton, stay hydrated, and don't dilute your electrolytes at the same time. But your body mass, you should be well muscled, okay? And that's all for this video and this video series.